Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nathan Ritz. I'm Director of Regional Workforce Development and Education for the Greater Des Moines Partnership. With that title also comes the title of Director of the Greater Des Moines Partnership's Inclusion Council, which is responsible for bringing this educational event to you. We're going to try to start hosting these on a more regular basis. They have been requested by our partners, and so we're going to try to match up educational resources for you on an as-needed basis. Should you have requests for future events or webinars that you think we should host, or maybe you want to host a webinar through our committee, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Nathan Ritz, and I could be emailed at nritz, R-I-T-Z, @DesMoinesMetro.com. A couple of quick housekeeping notes, just so you know that this webinar is being recorded. So if you hear something wonderful, which I'm sure you will, you can share the link after the fact with some of your friends, colleagues, coworkers, or even push it out on social media to those people you think could definitely benefit from having this information at their fingertips. So we have a great presentation lined up for you today. Should at any point during the conversation you have questions, you'll be able to use the chat option. And once I'm done talking here, I'll send you all a quick chat. I'm in the system as my colleague Meg Fitz. So we share one login, so don't get anything confused there. Meg Fitz, Nathan Ritz, it sounds a little confusing, but just know that if you need to reach me, you have a question through this system, go ahead and shoot that to me at any time. I'll respond right away and either say I'll interrupt the conversation, or I may ask you if I could save it until the end at a more fitting time. With that, I want to jump right into our meat of the reason why we're here today. And I'm actually going to start with our presenter's bio. So Tony was born in Ottumwa, and shortly after graduation from Ottumwa High School, joined the United States Army, where he served for 10 years until he was injured and received a medical discharge. He then returned back to Ottumwa, and after a few months of looking for employment, was hired as the Disabled Veterans Outreach Program Representative for what was then the Ottumwa Job Service. He continued in that position for 4.5 years until '91, at which time he was hired by the United States Department of Labor as the Assistant Director for VETS. VETS stands for Veterans Employment and Training Service. In August of 2000, he was promoted to his current position as State Director for VETS, and at that time, he and his family relocated to the Des Moines area. In his current position with VETS, his office is functionally responsible for the following within the state of Iowa: ensuring the promotion, operation, and implementation of all veterans' employment and training programs and services, ensuring proper veterans' employment under federal contracts, responsible enforcement, education, and training for the Uniformed Service Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, monitoring and providing technical assistance on grants for the state of veterans employment and training programs, along with monitoring of 3 homeless veteran reintegration programs. The 3 areas are located in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and Quad Cities. Also in the room, we have my friend and colleague, Becky Cody. She is a Diversity Inclusion Council member, and will also jump in a little bit at the end. She's a program support for ESGR. So should we have any questions that she can address as well, we'll definitely be able to have those conversations. Without any further delay, I will hand the conversation over to our very capable presenters and let them move on with their presentation.
Thank you, Meg. I'm sorry, Nathan.
You're fine.
See, I was thinking Nathan/Meg, but then I said Meg. So anyway, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to provide the information and want to reinforce that the purpose here is to be proactive versus reactive, because we really believe the employers, of course, want to do the right thing. We just need to make sure they know what it is, and sometimes the law can be a little vague. So anyway, we want to do anything we can to assist you in providing services and to our service members. Go ahead. Okay, the purpose of the law, of course, is to encourage service in the uniformed services, minimize disruptions to both the employer and the military employee, and to prohibit discrimination. When we talk about encouraging service, if you think about it, it's an all-volunteer service, whether it's National Guard, active duty, and active duty. If an individual thought there was the chance that if they joined the National Guard and performed their weekend drill, they wouldn't be able to have a job with that employer, how many people would do that? So in order to maintain our military and the operations that they need to perform. That's why it's so important that employers are a part of this and they share equally in that. We'll talk more in detail about the discrimination and how we can assist, and with Becky's assistance in her program with the Employer Support for Guard and Reserve, how we can work together to try to minimize the disruptions to the extent that we can. Okay, the discrimination, probably the most important part of the law is that shall not be denied initial employment, reemployment, retention, or any benefit of employment. The way this works is that once the claimant files a complaint or has an inquiry, says that I was denied some type of benefit of employment because of my military, then the employer is required to provide documentation to prove that the same actions would have occurred but for the military. And within this, the third bullet doesn't have to be the sole factor, just a motivating factor. Currently, we're working a case where an individual files a complaint and informs their employer that they're going to be gone an extended period of time, and we're talking 12 months to perform military service. Shortly after that, they're terminated by the employer because of a workplace violation. So we asked the employer to provide us documentation to prove that the same actions would have occurred. Even though they have a policy with no progressive discipline that requires progressive discipline, there was none provided, and it goes on, and so within that, the employer hasn't met their burden as of yet, so we're trying to work through that. Again, documentation, we're not saying you can't fire a military person, but you do need to document it, and of course it shouldn't be discriminatory. Who's protected? It's one size fits all. It's Army, Navy, Marine Corps, active, inactive, Army, National Guard, Air Guard. It also includes individuals that are just planning on joining the military. So if they're working with a recruiter and they inform you, I'm going to meet with my recruiter to take a test, they're protected in the same manner as an individual who is performing service on a weekend drill or leaving to go on active duty for up to 5 years. It's all protected, so it's all encompassing. The other side of it, when it's not only the military, this law is designed as a one-size-fits-all for employers, so whether you have one employee or 1,000, it's all covered. So, okay, what it doesn't do is supersede. So if you have a policy that provides benefits above and beyond, whether it be pay differential, those type of things, it doesn't take away from that. Within the law, it specifically says it doesn't. So if you have a policy that requires that in order for an employer to perform service, they need to submit a certain documentation, a certain time period, that would be something that would be against the law, be above and beyond. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Okay, who is eligible? Anyone who is absent from the position, whether voluntary or involuntary. One of the questions we get and consistently is, my employee is volunteering to perform service. The law does not differentiate service. It says voluntary or involuntary. So the fact that they're volunteering, that's one of their responsibilities. And if the military, if their commander, the military puts them on orders or orders them to perform service, then they're protected. And also the law says there's no limit on the frequency or duration of the military service. Now there is some exclusions that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but if a person is going to perform military training, it could happen a lot and quite a bit. Now Becky will talk in a little bit with the ESGR, and if you have questions of whether the person is actually performing the service, you can contact their office and they can provide you assistance and contact where you can find out and talk to the unit as far as that. But at the end of the day, if the individual is ordered to perform service, then it's your responsibility to allow them to perform that service. The eligibility, any job other than one that is brief and non-recurrent. And brief and non-recurrent does not, that would be if it's a one-time job, you know, as it sounds, brief, you know, and so you have some pile of rubbish that needs to be cleaned up. Once it's cleaned up, the job's done. Of course, that's brief and non-recurrent. They're working for a temp agency on a temp to perm, then they would be protected in the same manner as any other employee. We'd look at what would happen. Would their position go from temp to permanent? If so, then that would be the position we look at. They have to report back in a timely manner. We'll detail that in the next slide. Go ahead. Okay, I'm sorry, we'll talk about the reinstatement in a few slides, but what the employee's responsibility or the service member's responsibilities are is to provide advanced written or verbal notice. And we always, in every briefing that we provide to the soldiers, and we provide them a very similar briefing as this, we always advise them written is better. So a message, copy of their drill schedule, which they receive in advance, is to provide you the notice as soon as they receive it. They should provide it to you. Now, the law does not say how much advance it should be. Like you say, we would advise them as soon as they receive it, they provide it. If they withhold it and provide it to you on Thursday before they leave on a Saturday, that would be within the law. We would expect them to do better. And again, that's something we're going to, if they are withholding it from you until the last minute, we could contact the unit and make sure that we get that corrected. But the law is somewhat liberal when it comes to things like this. The notice may be given by a service member over the appropriate officer. That would be if the service member is not available for some reason, if they've been called to active duty and they're unavailable. That's very rare that happens, and the same way with the third bullet point. Again, that's very rare that would ever happen. So go ahead, Nate. Okay, the duration of service, we talked about this. There is up to 5 years of cumulative service, but the exclusions are many, and that would be anything that's for training, during the Iraq, Afghanistan missions, those individuals that are performing, we call it under Title 10, which is the category of their orders. If they're performing under it, it is excluded also. So you could have someone that's in a 10-year period performed 7 years of military service and still have reemployment rights. And what we will do, if there's ever a question of whether the service meets the 5-year requirement, provide us the documentation that the individual will provide you, and we will validate whether or not it is protected or exempted from the 5 years, because it does get extremely confusing of what is covered and what isn't covered. But generally, your 2-week summer, your annual training, your weekend drills, none of that is protected. So, or none of that is included in that 5 years. But again, if there's any questions on what's covered or what's not, please just let us know and we'll provide you the details, based on your documentation. Go ahead. Okay, the individual's deadline for return. Depending on the period of their service, if their service is less than 31 days, they have to report back the next scheduled shift following travel from their unit to their residence and 8 hours of rest. So how that would play out is if a person works third shift, which would start Sunday night at 11 o'clock, and they perform military service and get done at, say, 4 o'clock on Sunday, would they need to report back that 11 o'clock shift? By this, most likely not, depending on where they live and how far their travel was, that information. They would report back their next scheduled shift, which would be that Monday night versus the Sunday night. Now, they can report back, they just can't be required to do that. 31 to 180 days, they have 14 days to make applications, and over 180 days, they have 90 days. If they are hospitalized or convalescing, as you read, that's 2 years. And again, that's the extreme. That very seldom does happen. But if there's any questions on that, again, the time to report back. The one thing we haven't discussed that is important is how long do you have to let an individual off to report to training. And the law says that you should allow them time off so that they can arrive at their unit in a rested condition. So what we do is we take this and put it in reverse. So if an individual has to report for military training at 6 o'clock on Saturday morning, and the training, they work in Des Moines, their training is in Sioux City, would you work them until 10 o'clock that night? No, they need to be able to be off so that they can travel from Des Moines to Sioux City, get a full night's rest, and report it at 6 o'clock that morning. So the law just says arrive in a rested condition, and if you apply this in reverse, it works out really well. So good. Okay, once the individual comes back, if the service was for more than 31 days, you can request documentation. The documentation would be military orders or a DD-214, which would be a discharge paper. Many, many times the documentation is not available because it hasn't been produced yet. They have performed the service, they have been released, but the paperwork will catch up with them. So if there's ever a question, again, as far as were they performing the service, that type of thing, did they report back, again, contact, and you'll have Becky's phone number at the end, and contact the Employer Support for Guard and Reserve, and they'll be able to assist you with giving you information on where we can obtain that documentation. If the service is for less than 30 days, if it's a weekend drill or the summer annual training, there's no requirement for them to provide any form of documentation. But again, if there's ever a question of did they perform the service that they said they were doing, contact the Employer Support for Guard and Reserve, and we'll be able to provide you with information on where to get it. So
you can request their annual calendar. About August, September is when every unit will disseminate the next year's calendar of drill weekends and their annual training schedule. You can request that, you just can't demand it. So I would suggest you reach out to your service members that you employ and simply have them provide that to you.
And remember, this webinar is for those of you on the phone, so should we be moving too quickly or you have a question and you need us to go back to something, please make sure you're utilizing that chat or question option, and we'll definitely be happy to field your question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Becky.
You're fine. And just remember, when you receive it in the fall, that annual calendar, that it can change. Drill schedules do change often. Just always keep that in mind.
Thank you very much. So again, make sure that if there is ever a question, just reach out to Becky's office, and she'll be able to assist you in providing you information on where and who to talk to. And also, we would always recommend that you become familiar with the unit that your employee is in, so that you have a contact with that unit. Next one, please. Okay, if it's not available, like I say, contact us. We will provide it. Now, at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the USERRA law is the floor, and it doesn't supersede anything that an employer would provide in addition to, and it mentioned pay differential. If there is a pay differential and you require that an individual provide documentation coming back as far as their leave and earnings statement or a certain format that they want you to do it, and you'll provide them with an additional benefit, you can request that. And if they want that benefit, they need to meet your requirement. If they just want to come back to work and be reinstated timely, then they don't have to. But they're not going to get your benefit if they don't follow the rules that you set up. So if it's above and beyond, then absolutely you can request certain types of documentation, and that. So this depends on what the benefit is. Just reinstatement, you know, financial written verbal notice, reinstatement, no documentation, unless it's for more than 30 days. Okay, go ahead. Okay, once they perform their service, then the law requires that they be reinstated and promptly reinstated, which means as soon as possible, not more than 2 weeks. And when we look at that, we look at the escalator. And so the simple thing would be, where would they have been had they not been gone for military service? It includes all benefits that accrue from seniority. So seniority is easy. That if it's a place and they have a bid and the jobs are assigned based on seniority, then when they come back, they get the opportunity to make all bids that they would have been able to do had they not been gone for military service. And this accrues when they come back, not while they're gone, but when they come back, they're entitled to all those things. So the employer really needs to be cognizant of what happened, what would have happened. Now this includes not only, you know, seniority benefits, it includes non-seniority benefits. So whatever the most favorable treatment provided other individuals in a similar type of leave of absence, and it has to be comparable. So if we have someone that's on a week unpaid leave of absence and they get a benefit, then the military service would get it for that same type of leave of absence. It has to be similar. So once they come back, we provide them all benefits that accrue from seniority and non-seniority benefits to the same as other individuals similarly receive. And that would include a position of like seniority, status, and pay. Status is the big one. It includes location, shift, responsibilities, all aspects of it. So we've had employers say, well, I'm going to give them the same pay on the same job or the same shift in the same locality. It's just that they're not going to be running the machine that they left. They're going to be running this extra machine because it's empty. So we would have to look, and there may be a status issue. Is the way they get to that machine based on seniority? Is it based on responsibility? That type of thing. Just because they're making the same money at the same shift doesn't mean it meets all the requirements of shift. So it is really important to look at the totality of the reinstatement and make sure that they have the ability to be where they would have been had they not been gone. Go ahead, Nick. Okay, with that, if there was a case that we worked not too long ago, an individual, when they left, they were a supervisor working on first shift, performing, supervising a production line. When they came back, we'll talk about this example, but there was another one where this individual has to do a status. They were a supervisor on a production line. While they left, they were gone for 18 months. They returned. The company had completely revamped that assembly line and did a complete new process, it provided training and extensive training. And so they said, we'll bring him back, but he's no longer a supervisor. He's going to be working on the line. We're going to pay him the same as he would be making had he not been gone. He'd be working the same shift. But instead of supervising, he was now a worker. And so it was the status was the big one. And so we had to go in and they had to give him the same ability and the same training they provided everyone else that would have brought him back and keep him as the supervisor he was when he left. There's another example here. And again, this happened to be as a mechanic at a dealership locally. And the individual was a full functioning mechanic, was gone 3.5 years. He returned back. They put him out on the line and said, and put him on the production, fix these cars. Well, the technology moved so quick, he was behind and he could not make his flat rate and was not viable. He wasn't making money, and of course the company wasn't either. And so they let him go, and they said, well, we're a small company, we don't have trainers. So as we investigated, we looked at how other individuals were trained throughout that period, and they had online courses, they had mentors that they assigned people with, those type of things. And it took several months for them to provide the training and to get him trained in all the different certifications he needed that he missed out on in that 3.5 years. But the employer was able to do it, and he's a full functioning mechanic to this date. Now the problem with that, it took several months for this all to transpire until we got it straightened out, and the employer was responsible for the lost wages. And so they did have to pay several $1,000s. And our intention is if this employer would have realized all this and put it in place, the service member wouldn't have been unemployed, the employer wouldn't have had to pay the lost wages, and it would have all happened. Again, we want to be proactive versus reactive. I mentioned prompt reinstatement as soon as possible, not more than 2 weeks. So that's the most important part. So, good. If there is a disability, the law does require reasonable accommodations. And it's not the same as the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities. It's not the same. It's excuse me. But it's very, again, it just says reasonable efforts. And what we do is we work with the company, and we also work with the Veterans Administration. And if there is an accommodation that required that involves pay or training, we're able to access their resources to do that. We've done several of these within the state, and never have we had an employer had to put money out of their pocket. We've always been able to provide the training or get the training available to meet the employer's needs without that. And so again, we need to look at what positions are available based on what the employer can do, what the employee can do. So we don't ask you to pay someone to be a mechanic if they don't have the ability or the capability to be a mechanic. We look at what job they can do within the employer's facility and that. So it's very complicated, but yet it works really well once we see what the person can do versus what the jobs are they have. Again, we work one-on-one with that. And the biggest thing is the Veterans Administration is really good at providing us the accommodations if there's one needed. They have the training available, whether it's local, through a university, whatever it is. So it works really well when in those situations. If there is a full fill-in employee, then the law would say that this person would bump that fill-in. Now, the one thing that the state of Iowa has done is that within the unemployment system, if you haven't hired an individual as a fill-in for this military service member, when they come back, and if you do have to lay them off, then they can exempt your account from the unemployment requirement or the unemployment charges. So that could be a big deal. So unfortunately, if there is a layoff, this individual would take precedence on that, and they get back. So, okay, Nick. Okay. Pension contributions. Again, they're entitled to all benefits that accrue from seniority. Pension, of course, is one of the big ones. So they get the opportunity to make up the contributions in the same manner they would have had they not been gone. They get up to 3 times their period of service, up to a maximum of 5 years, whichever is less. So you do set them up a payroll deduction, and they would make contributions, not only their current contributions, plus their missed contributions. As far as doing the lump sums, then you need to follow the ERISA rules when it comes to lump sum payments. In most cases, they need to do it a payroll deduction and do it in the same manner. Once the service member makes their contribution, then the employer makes theirs. This doesn't happen while they're gone. The benefit only requires and matures once the individual is reinstated. So some individuals will say, well, I want to keep making the payment so I don't miss out on the interest. Well, the benefit hasn't matured until they perform their service and report back and are reinstated. So once they're back, the opportunity to make up the missed contributions. Health insurance, very similar to the COBRA. The only difference is under USERRA, it's 24 months versus 18 months. You can do the 102%, so the administrative cost. The other difference on this is when they come back, immediate reinstatement, no waiting period, no pre-existing conditions. So other than a pre-existing condition if it's a service connection. So immediate reinstatement, no waiting period, no pre-existing causes. With these individuals, a lot of them have military coverage called TRICARE while they're gone, so they still have the ability to do this, or if they choose not to and they work with you so that when their TRICARE expires, then they're able to get back on your insurance, they could do that. You just need to work with your provider to make sure that they're not denied or there's no lapses in coverage. Okay, here's a scenario. A military employee tells his manager he has his annual training coming up in a month. The manager says, that's fine, but you need to use your vacation time. And can a manager and employer require this? And we would look at vacation would be comp time or other types of earned time off. The answer would be, of course, no. It's the service member's right to use that if they choose to use it when they come back at any time. If they want to remain in a paid status with the employer, then of course they can use it during that period of service. The only caveat, the only way that the employer would change would be if you have a use or lose policy, and at the end of the program year or end of the physical year, if a person has not used their time off, they lose it, then you need to make sure they understand those, and if they're going to be gone during that period of time, ensure they have the opportunity to use the time off. So again, the standard answer would be no, you can't require that they use it. An employee tells his manager he has a drill weekend in 2 weeks scheduled to work. The manager tells him he may go as long as he finds someone to cover his shift. This happens again quite often. Probably one of the issues we have is with medical facilities with nurses that are working weekend shifts, and they say, no, it's no problem, but you need to find your fill-in, just like you would if you were going to take some other time off. Again, it's not their responsibility to find someone to work their shift. It's their responsibility to provide you notice. It's your responsibility to grant the time off. Sure.
This might be a good spot, Tony, to also talk about when. This might be a good time for Tony to also address questions that we often receive in regard to, I had a brain lapse. If this was your weekend to work and now you have to make it up.
Right. Again, it's the employer's responsibility just to provide the time off. Now, as far as making it up, the law would say, again, you can't be denied initial employment, reemployment, or any benefit of employment. And in benefits of employment, the definition includes the opportunity to select hours of work, those type of things. So if a person is working on a rotating shift and their weekend off falls where it is, let's say it's on the second weekend, the first weekend they have military drill and they're going to be gone, they don't forego their weekend off in order to perform military service and make it up and have to work their normal weekend off. So now they would be required to get their time off plus their weekend. So again, benefits to employment include the opportunity to work and select days off, hours, that type of thing. So again, unless you can show, now if it's a coincidence and it falls on that same weekend, you don't have to give them an additional weekend. But if their normal day weekend off is you can't require that they're only going to get one weekend off, and you can't require it to be their military one. So, good. Okay, again, if there's any questions, please just let us know. I'd be glad to answer those or different. Okay. Okay, next one. Okay. Another difference on the law, there is a protection against discharge without cause for 1 year if the military service is for over 180 days. So as human resource and managers, we all know that documentation, again, at the beginning I said, they don't have super seniority. They can't do something that would cause them to be fired and just have protection just because they're in the military. But with this, there is a requirement of documentation that so they need to have progressive discipline. They need to know that the behavior that they may or may not be fired for, if it doesn't change, they're going to be fired. But they need to understand what they're doing wrong and what the ramifications are going to be if they don't change that behavior. And that's where we look at. So again, documentation, and provide them progressive discipline and make sure they understand that what they're doing is wrong, and if it continues, they're going to be terminated. If there is, again, for 6 months, they have protection against discharge. If their service is 31 to 180 days, they have 6 months without charge. And when they establish that their military was a motivating factor or indicate that it is, then the burden of proof goes to the employer. Again, documentation to show that the same things would have occurred, that you provided them notice, you informed them that if their attendance issues continued, that they were going to be disciplined. They get a warning. You provide you don't have to provide a formal, where you 1 week off after the second incident, whatever your policy is, but you do need to make sure they understand that what the policy, what the requirement is, and you follow it. Okay. There's another one where individuals who, when I am investigating, we'll say you need to talk to this person. They heard them make comments, derogatory comments about my military. That witness would be protected under law in the same manner as the person filing the complaint. So we need to, again, that's pretty standard from an employer standpoint, but we do have the ability to not only protect that individual, we can subpoena them if need be, or subpoena the employer for documentation. Okay. Is the individual always entitled to the same position that they had? We look at it for the period of service they were gone. If they're gone for less than 90 days, 91 days, we look at where they would have been. So it's normally the same job, or if while they were gone that 90 days, they'd have been able to apply for one. Their service is for more than 90 days, a position of like seniority, status, and pay. And again, as we talked about status, that is the big one. It has to include all benefits that come from it, include rank, responsibility. So we look at where they would have been had they not been gone. It gives the employer a little latitude, but if there's 4 jobs, they're all in the same location, they're all bid the same, we can show that they would have been in one of those, then that would be a like seniority status pay. But it's, we have to look at the positions and how they're awarded, what the policy and what the actual practice of the company is to determine that. So it gives a little more detail as far as the seniority, just location, those type of things. Okay. Your employer, your responsibilities as an employer, the guard member has to provide the responsibility, your employees, so they have to provide you advance written or verbal notice. Again, we always say written is better, and again, if there's ever a question about is the person performing service, are they waiting to the last minute to tell me? As Becky mentioned a little earlier, they get an annual drill schedule a year in advance. Usually comes out in October or September for October. The unit, the military is expecting that to be provided to you. If for some reason you don't receive it or your individual doesn't communicate, waits till the very last minute and it creates problems, please let Becky's office know and they'll be able to give you contact with someone within the military and they can get that rectified, because the military expects them to provide you notice and to work with you and at all possible. Provide documentation. Again, just because they've been gone more than 31 days doesn't mean they're going to have a discharge. There's an actual paper copy of it. Sometimes those are a month or 2, 3 months after the fact that they receive it. but we can work with the employer support guard and reserve. We can provide, again, information on how to get that documentation, and who to talk to verify that the individual did perform the service, those type of things. They do also need to make sure they report back in a timely manner. We've talked about that earlier. Okay, if there's any, again, I know I went a little fast, but the slides are fairly clear. If there's any questions or at any time we can help you, whether you have an issue with an employer that says, I don't agree with this, I was told that I would be treated like I never left, and so I want paid for my vacation while I'm gone. Are they entitled to vacation pay while they're gone, or to earn vacation? Only if you provide it to other individuals on a similar type leave of absence. You know, those type of things. Sometimes individuals need to hear it from us, and we'll be glad to do a conference call. We'll do anything we can to work with you to get the right information to the individuals so that your employee understands what their rights are, and you know, and work with you to do that. So with that, any questions, again, let us know or call us, and we'll be glad to answer them one-on-one. And in the meantime, I'll turn it over to Becky. Nate?
Yeah, and while we're getting ready to transition, this is an excellent time that if you do have some questions for Tony, that you can go ahead and submit those via the chat option as well. But as we're waiting for those to come in, I'll actually turn it over to Becky.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time today and joining us on the GoTo meeting. It's one of my favorite venues for sure on training. Employer support of the Guard and Reserve, I'm not going to bore you with all the little details on this, but we have been around for a long time, and our goal is, our goal is to provide support to Guard reservists and the employers they work for. Now, since we became a volunteer organization or volunteer force in the Guard and Reserves and all members of the armed forces, the government decided it was time for us to have an organization to help support those stakeholders. There's just 3 paid staff that facilitate or support volunteers statewide. Now, volunteers in this sense are those folks that contribute to provide support to employers, reaching out to employers like yourselves, providing seminars like this, lunch and learns, etc., as well as ensuring that military members have a source to turn to with any USERRA questions they may have. And our military outreach volunteers attend unit drills to provide the same training that Tony just did with you at unit assemblies. All the pictures that you've seen in Tony's presentation were all from boss lift events. One of our employer outreach programs is to bring employers to a duty station so you have a feeling or understand what our Guard reservists go through their training, that it's not just sitting there in the field twiddling their thumbs. They are actively participating in very strenuous training events. We have an event going to Fort McCoy on June 10 to do just that. And we also have different events at Camp Dodge, as you see in the bottom pictures, where employers actually have hands-on experience in handling the same kind of training tools that our Guard reservists do.
Excuse me. One thing I wanted to mention on Becky's slide, company training. We just did an event last week with an employer where they had us come in and provide training to their supervisor. They had about 42 managers within this large facility, and the thing that we find out is 99% of the time the issue is at the ground level. It's that frontline supervisor who said, no, I can't allow you to go on drill this weekend. It's mandatory overtime. Or no, I don't like it that you're gone all the time, so they give them a low evaluation and they end up losing a bonus. So it's always at that local level or at the ground level. And we, like I say, we did it, and it was very well received, and we're going to go back and provide some additional training to their supervisors. So we will do that at your convenience, whether it's at third shift, second shift, wherever it's at, whatever works for you we'll be glad to provide that. And again, it's at no cost, and it's that we want to make sure that they do it. But again, it's that frontline supervisors where we see the issues.
I actually had the opportunity to participate in one of the Center of Influence events where a team and I was able to go out to Camp Dodge and participate in. We did a Humvee rollover in the shooting range, and we saw the medical training, and of course we had the talks with the different officials out there to really understand the depth and the breadth of what really occurs during these trainings. And then the biggest treat at the end for me was going up in a helicopter. So I'd never been in a helicopter before, so that was a lot of fun for me. If you have this opportunity, or if you want to make this opportunity happen, I would definitely encourage you, from my perspective and experience, to really reach out to them as these become available.
Thank you, Nathan. They are very exciting, and to give part of your day just to experience just a few hours in the life of a soldier really will open your eyes to what it's really like. And honestly, you know, 4 hours probably isn't going to be long enough, and most of our participants wish they could be there all day. But it is an experience of a lifetime that, like Nathan said, if you ever have the opportunity, the flyer comes to your desk, please contact us and jump on board. Or if one of your service members that works for you is, hey, do you want to go? Find the time. It's so important to even sit down and talk to them about what is it that they do. Ask them to share their pictures with you. You know, even that little bit of interest in what they're experiencing as a soldier will help build a relationship between them and you. And as Tony said, the managers and supervisors, we've done all 3 shifts for companies that have multiple shifts of employees. We're willing to do whatever, again, as he said, is convenient for you. Go ahead. On this particular slide, a lot of folks don't understand the difference between the Guard and the Reserves. And I think this is an important time for me to talk to you about operational force. What is an operational force? You may have heard that term thrown around a lot here lately. The Guard and Reserve is becoming an operational force. Now, when you look at what is the difference between the Guard and the Reserve, it is pretty much how are they run. The Guard is state-bound. Every single state in the United States has a National Guard headquarters. That headquarters then runs, guides, maintains all the units that are in that state for the National Guard. Now on the Reserve side, as you see in the top right corner, they actually make up several different states. For example, the 103rd ESC, which is headquartered here in Fort Des Moines, has units in all the states that you see there on the right side. It's much harder to build a relationship with the Reserve side for us as an ESGR organization. However, what's important to really recognize here for reservists is the distance they travel to military duty. Tony addressed that amount of time they would need prior to leaving for military service, that there is no specific time needed. Please work with them on what is the distance they have to travel. Even members of the Guard, even though they drill here in the state, they may have to travel 4 hours, say, to Dubuque, or 3 hours to Sioux City, or to southeast corner of the state. They may be leaders within their organization, so they may have to be there a little bit before all the rest of their troops arrive. So make sure that you understand what is the need for them in their travel time. One of the other differences is the Guard is state and federal, so they can deploy for state emergency as well as any federal deployments. Currently, the National Guard has about 160 soldiers, men and women, that are deploying to Afghanistan. The Air Guard specifically, if you're in the Des Moines area, you may see your airman, but you're thinking, oh, hey, he's deployed. Well, the Air National Guard, because their mission has changed, they are going to be doing their at the 132nd Wing here at the airport. So you may see them, but they are on orders to perform duty. So keep that in mind as as you may see these folks around and about. On the federal side, right now they can only support federal missions, but they have been released to be able to support state, national, or natural disasters, but they have to be called by the president in order to do that. For example, if we have a Hurricane Sandy, was the first time that Army reservists were actually pulled in to help support that natural disaster. As an operational force, again, what does that mean? With active duty downsizing, which means that the Department of Defense has decreased in funds.
Am I on the right slide?
Yeah.
Okay,
yep,
sorry.
Yep, you're good. As active duty is continually seeing a decrease in funding, they're cutting the numbers for their size of what their units can be. What does that mean? That means that we'll see an increase of Guard and Reservists be called for active duty events, or which may be anywhere from 6 months duty up to a year or more. You may see additional drill duty days. Now, if you've heard of a MUTA, you may not understand what MUTA is, which is spelled M-U-T-A. It's a military unit training assembly. So when you have somebody bring you their drill schedule and it says MUTA on there, MUTA 4, MUTA 6, MUTA 8, every MUTA is considered a half a day. So 2 MUTAs is 1 full day. So you may have some folks that are going to be gone from Thursday through Sunday for drill weekends. This is becoming more typical for training schedules, but then you may also see that they're going to take the whole month of September off and not have any drill at all. So they're absorbing those earlier in the year. Now, as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, the government's fiscal year begins in October. Anytime there is a continuing resolution or a delay in the passing of the budget, you may find that your Guard or reservist has already told you they have what their drill weekend will be in October, and then it's canceled. Because if the government has not approved funding or done a continuing resolution, nobody can get paid to perform duty. But then, because they're required to have so many training days available or attend, they will have to make that up later on in the year if they have a canceled drill in October. Go ahead. These are the components in Iowa that ESGR supports, or our 106 volunteers support. We do have a Coast Guard reserve down in southeast Iowa, but they are so small that we have had absolutely no luck in figuring how to reach them. Our Ombudsman Services, we work very closely with Tony. He mentioned reaching out to us several times during his presentation. We're the very lowest level of communication between service members and their unit, or you and their unit, or the service member. So please reach out to us with any challenges you're seeing or clarification